Washington State. The Little Minister by J. M. Barrie. Chapter 17. Intrusion of Haggart into these pages against the author's wish. Margaret, having heard the doctor say that one may catch cold in the back, had decided instantly to line Gavin's waistcoat with flannel. She was thus engaged with pins in her mouth and scissors hiding from her every time she wanted them, when Jean, red and flurried, abruptly entered the room. "There! I forgot to knock at the door again," Jean exclaimed, pausing contritely. "Never mind. Is it Rob Dow wanting the minister?" asked Margaret, who had seen Rob pass the manse dyke. "Na, he wasna wanting to see the minister." "Ah, then he came to see you, Jean?" said Margaret archly. "A widow man?" cried Jean, tossing her head. "But Rob Dow was in no condition to be friendly wi' onybody the now." "Jean, you don't mean that he has been drinking again?" "I canna say he would drunk." "Then what condition was he in?" "He was in a swearing condition," Jean answered guardedly. "But what I want to speir at you is, can I gang down to the Tenements for a minute? I'll run there and back." "Certainly you can go, Jean, but you must not run. You are always running. Did Dow bring you word that you were wanted in the Tenement?" "No exactly, but I want to consult Thomas Haggart about something." "About Dow, I believe, Jean?" "No, but about something he has done. Oh, ma'am, you surely didn't think I would take a widow man." It was the day after Gavin's meeting with the Egyptian at the Kaims, and here is Jean's real reason for wishing to consult Haggart. Half an hour before she hurried to the parlour, she had been at the kitchen door, wondering whether she should spread out her washing in the garret or risk hanging it in the courtyard. She had just decided on the garret when she saw Rob Dow morosely regarding her from the gateway. "Where is he?" growled Rob. "He's out. But it's no for me to say where he is," replied Jean, whose weakness was to be considered a church official. "No that I ken," truthfulness compelled her to add, for she had an ambition to be everything she thought Gavin would like a woman to be. Rob seized her wrists viciously and glowered into her face. "You're ane o' them," he said. "Let me go. Ane o' what?" "Ane o' thae limmers called women." "Sal," reported Jean with spirit, "you're ane o' thae brutes called men. You're drunk, Rob Dow. In the legs, maybe, but no higher. I haud a heap." "Drunk again after all your promises to the minister, and you said yourself he had pulled you out of hell by the root." "It's himself that has flung me back again," Rob said wildly. "Jean Baxter, what does it mean when a minister carries flowers in his pouch, and takes them out to look at them ilka a minute?" "How do you ken about the holly?" asked Jean, off her guard. "You limmer," said Dow. "You've been in his pouches." "It's a lie," cried the outraged Jean. "I just saw the holly this morning in a jug on his chimley." "Carefully put by? Is it hard on the chimley? Does he stand looking at it? Do you tell me he's fond like o' it?" "Mercy me!" Jean exclaimed, beginning to shake. "Why is she, Rob Dow?" "Let me see it first in its jug," Rob answered slyly, "and syne I may tell you." This was not the only time Jean had been asked to show the minister's belongings. Snecky Hobart, among others, had tried on Gavin's hat in the manse kitchen, and felt queer for some time afterwards. Women had been introduced on tiptoe to examine the handle of his umbrella. But Rob had not come to admire. He snatched the holly from Jean's hands, and casting it on the ground, pounded it with his heavy boots, crying, "Great as you like, Jean. That's the end of his flowers. And if I had a toppy he got them frae, I would serve her in the same way." "I'll tell him what you've done," said terrified Jean, who had tried to save the berries at the expense of her fingers. "Tell him," Dow roared, "and tell him what I said too. And tell him I was at the Kaims yestreen. Tell him I'm hunting high and low for an Egyptian woman." He flung restlessly out of the courtyard, leaving Jean looking blankly at the mud that had been holly lately. Not his act of sacrilege was distressing her, but his news. Were these berries a love token? Had God let Rob Dow say they were a gypsy's love token, and not slain him? That Rob spoke of the Egyptian of the riots, Jean never doubted. It was known that the minister had met this woman in Nanny Webster's house, but was it not also known that he had given her such a talking to as she could never come above? Many could repeat the words in which he had announced to Nanny that his wealthy friends in Glasgow were to give her all she needed. They could also tell how majestic he looked when he turned the Egyptian out of the house. In short, Nanny having kept her promise of secrecy, the people had been forced to construct the scene in the mud-house for themselves, and it was only their story that was known to Jean. She decided that, so far as a gypsy was concerned, Rob had talked trash. Had he seen the holly in the minister's hand, and being in drink had mixed it up with the gossip about the Egyptian? But that Gavin had preserved the holly because of the donor was as obvious to Jean as that the vase in her hand was empty. Who could she be? No doubt all the single ladies in Thrums were in love with him, but that, Jean was sure, had not helped them a step forward. To think was to Jean a waste of time. Discovering that she had been thinking, she was dismayed. There were the wet clothes in the basket looking reproachfully at her. She hastened back to Gavin's room with the vase, but it too had eyes, and they said, "When the minister misses his holly, he will question you." Now Gavin had already smiled several times to Jean, and once he had marked passages for her in her Pilgrim's Progress, with the result that she prized the marks more even than the passages. To lose his good opinion was terrible to her. In her perplexity she decided to consult wise Tammas Haggart, and hence her appeal to Margaret. To avoid Kirsty, the humorist's wife, Jean sought Haggart at his workshop window, which was so small that an old book sufficed for its shutter. Haggart, whom she could see distinctly at his loom, soon guessed from her knocks and signs, for he was strangely quick in the uptake, that she wanted him to open the window. "I want to speak to you confidentially," Jean said in a low voice. "If you saw a grand man gey fond of a flower, what would you think?" "I would think, Jean," Haggart answered reflectively, "that he had gained siller for it. Ay, I would wonder." "What would you wonder?" "I would wonder how muckle he paid." "But if he was a minister, and keepit the flower, say it was a common rose, fond like on his chimney, what would you think?" "I would think it was a black burning disgrace for a minister to be fond of flowers." "I dinna haud wi' that, Jean," said Haggart. "I allow no one to contradict me." "It wasna my design, but Tammas, if a minister was fond o' a particular flower, say a rose, and you destroyed it by an accident when he wasna looking, what would you do?" "I would gie him another rose for't." "But if you didn't want him to ken you had meddled with it on his chimney, what would you do?" "I would put the new rose on the chimney, and he would never ken the differ." "That's what I'll do," muttered Jean, but she said aloud, "But it micht be that particular rose he liked." "Havers, Jean, to a thinking man one rose is identical with another rose. But how are you speering?" "Just out of curiosity, and I maun be stepping now. Thank you kindly, Tammas, for your humour." "You're welcome," Haggart answered, and closed his window. That day Rob Dow spent in misery, but so little were his fears selfish that he scarcely gave a thought to his conduct at the manse. For an hour he sat at his loom with his arms folded. Then he slouched out of the house, cursing little Micah, so that a neighbour cried, "You drunken scoundrel!" after him. "He may be a wee drunk," said Micah in his father's defence, "but he's no mortal." Rob wandered to the Kaims in search of the Egyptian, and returned home no happier. He flung himself upon his bed and dared Micah to light the lamp. About gloaming he rose, unable to keep his mouth shut on his thoughts any longer, and staggered to the Tenements to consult Haggart. He found the humorist's door ajar, and Wearyworld listening at it. "Out of the road!" cried Rob savagely, and flung the policeman into the gutter. "That was ill done, Rob Dow," Wearyworld said, picking himself up leisurely. "I'm thinking it was weel done," snarled Rob. "Ay," said Wearyworld, "we needna quarrel about a difference of opinion, but—" Dow, however, had already entered the house and slammed the door. "Ay, ay," muttered Wearyworld, departing. You meet I stood still, Rob, and argued it out with me." In less than an hour after his conversation with Jean at the window, it had suddenly struck Haggart that the minister she spoke of must be Mr. Dishart. In 2 hours he had confided his suspicions to Kirsty. In 10 minutes she had filled the house with gossips. Rob arrived to find them all in full cry. "Hi, Rob," said Kirsty genially, for gossip levels ranks. "You are just in time to hear a query about the minister." "Rob," said the Glen Quharity post, from whom I subsequently got the story, "Mr. Dishart has fallen in what do you call the thing, Kirsty?" Birse knew well what the thing was called, but the word is a staggerer to say in company. "In love," answered Kirsty boldly. "Now we ken what he was doing in the country yestreen," said Snecky Hobart. "The witch has been bothering us sair." "The man's so full of flowers she sends him," says Tibbie Craik. "Jean's at her wits' end to ken whaur to put them." "Why is she?" It was Rob Dow who spoke. All saw he had been drinking, or they might have wondered at his vehemence. As it was, everybody looked at every other body, and then everybody sighed. "Ay, who is she?" repeated several. "I see you ken nothing about her," said Rob, much relieved, and then he lapsed into silence. "We ken a' about her," said Snecky, "'cept just wha she is. Ay, that's what we ken at bottom. Maybe you could guess, Tammas." "Maybe I could, Sneck," Haggart replied cautiously, "but on that point I offer no opinion." "If she bides on the Kaims road," said Tibbie Craik, "she maun be farmer's doctor. What say you to Bell Finlay?" "Na, she's U.P., but it might be Loups O'Malcolm's sister. She's promised to Mucklehaws, but no doubt she would gie him the go by at a word frae the minister." "It's mair likely," said Kirsty, "to be the factor at the Spittals lassie. The factor has a grand garden, and that would account for such basketfuls of flowers." "Whatever she is," said Birse, "I'm thinking he could hae done better." "I'll be fine pleased with ony o' them," said Tibbie, who had a magenta silk, and so was jealous of no one. "It has not been proved," Haggart pointed out, "that the flowers came frae thy parts. She may be sending them frae Glasgow." "I understood it was a Glasgow lady," said Snecky. "He'll be like the Tilliedrum minister that got a lady to send him to the Gulch on the promise that he would marry her as soon as he got a kirk. She made him sign a paper." "The far-seeing limmer!" exclaimed Kirsty. "But if that's what Mr. Dishart has done, how has he kept it so secret?" "He wouldna want a woman of the congregation to ken he was promised till after they had voted for him." "I dinna hand with that explanation o't," said Haggart, "but I may tell you that I ken for sure she's a Glasgow lady. Lads, ministers is near aye be spoke afore their licence. There's a michty competition for them in the big towns. Ay, the ladies just stand at the college gates, as you may say, and snap them up as they come out." "And just as well for the ministers, I'se uphaud," said Tibbie, "for it saves them a heap of persecution when they come to the like of Thrums. There was Mr. Meiklejohn, the U.P. minister. He was no sooner placed than every genteel woman in the town was persecuting him. The Miss Dobies was the maist shameless. They fair haunted him." "Ay," said Snecky, "and then the tale of the day, ane of them snapped him up. Billies, did you ever hear of a minister being refused?" "Never." "Weel then, I have, and by a widow woman too. His name was Samson, and if it had been Tamson she would have ta'en him." "Ah, you may look, but it's true. Her name was Turnbull, and she had another gent after her, name of Tibbets. She couldna make up her mind atween them, and for a while she just keeped them dangling on. Ay, but in the end she took Tibbets. And what do you think was her reason? As you ken, thae grand folk has their initials on their spoons and nickgowns. Ay, weel, she thocht it would be mair handy to take Tibbets, because if she had ta'en the minister, the T's would have had to be changed to S's. It was thochtful of her." "Is Tibbets living?" asked Haggart sharply. "No, he's dead." "What," asked Haggart, "was the corp to trade?" "I dinna ken." "I thocht no," said Haggart triumphantly. "Weel, I'll warrant he was a minister too. I catch a woman giving up a minister except for another minister." All were looking on Haggart with admiration, when a voice from the door cried, Listen, and I'll tell you a queer ane than that." "Daggone it," cried Birse, "it's Weirwarld, and he had been hearkening. Leave him to me." When the post returned, the conversation was back at Mr. Dishart. "Yes, lathies," Haggart was saying, "daftness about women comes to all, gentle and simple, common and colleged, humorous and no humorous. You say Mr. Dishart has preached o'er muckle at women to stoop to marriage, but that makes no differ. Mony a humorous thing hae I said about women, and yet Kirsty has me. It's the same with ministers. At aince they see a lassie no unlike other lassies, away goes their learning, and they skirl out, 'You dawty.' That's what comes to all." "But it hasna come to Mr. Dishart," cried Rob Dow, jumping to his feet. He had sought Haggart to tell him all, but now he saw the wisdom of telling nothing. "I'm sick of your blathers. Instead of the minister's being sweethearting yesterday, he was just at the Kaims visiting the gamekeeper. I met him in the Wast town end, and gaed there and back with him." "That's proof it's a Glasgow leddy," said Snecky. "I tell you there's no lady ava," swore Rob. "Ja, and wha sends the baskets of flowers then?" "There was only one flower," said Rob, turning to his host. I understood," said Haggart heavily, "that there was only one flower." "But though there was just ane," persisted Kirsty, "what we want to ken is wha gaed him." "It was me that gaed him it," said Rob. "It was growing on the roadside, and I plucked it and gae it to him." The company dwindled away shamefacedly, yet unconvinced. But Haggart had courage to say slowly, "Yes, Rob, I had a notion that he got it frae you." Meanwhile, Gavin, unaware that talk about him and a woman unknown had broken out in Thrums, was gazing sometimes lovingly and again with scorn at a little bunch of hollyberries which Jean had gathered from her father's garden. Once she saw him fling them out of his window, and then she rejoiced. But an hour afterwards she saw him pick them up, and then she mourned. Nevertheless, to her great delight, he preached his third sermon against woman on the following Sabbath. It was universally acknowledged to be the best of the series. It was also the last. End of chapter 17. Recorded by Sylvia M.B. in Washington State.